Losing people is just a part of life, but some deaths of famous people go unnoticed because of little to no media coverage, or you probably didn't even know they died because some of them passed.
Some celebrities built long careers on screen, but their real story often stayed hidden off-screen. Behind the fame, many of them shared a pattern few fans ever noticed. They fell in love and built a marriage through fame, struggle, and change. Then, one by one, each of them lost the spouse who had stood beside them. Not long after losing that person, something in their own life began to shift too. Some seemed to lose a piece of themselves that the public never saw. Today, we'll be looking at a list of 16 Black actors who passed away after facing grief. Their careers are well known, but this side of their story rarely gets told. What really happens to a person once the one who knew them best is suddenly gone? Join us as we find out. Number 1. Olivia Colle. Olivia Colle's story does not follow the pattern of long widowhood most people expect. She was born in Memphis, Tennessee in 1942 and went on to build her career on serious, disciplined training, studying drama at Bard College before earning honors at London's Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. She returned to the United States determined to bring real depth to roles that Hollywood rarely gave Black actresses. Her defining moment came in 1977 playing Matilda, Chicken George's devoted wife, in a groundbreaking television miniseries about slavery watched by an estimated 140 million people. That performance made her the first Black actress to win an Emmy in her category, earning her a reputation as one of the finest dramatic actresses of her generation. She married actor Richard Venture, whom she met performing together in a Washington stage production. Their marriage lasted 13 years before ending in divorce in the early 1980s. Colle never remarried afterward. She relocated permanently to San Miguel de Allende, Mexico, a town Venture had discovered years earlier while filming there, and built a normal life away from Hollywood. She lived far from the industry that had once celebrated her, forming a Shakespeare club in her adopted town and holding readings for 30 years. Her husband, meanwhile, remarried twice more before his own demise in December 2017 in Connecticut, at 94 years old. Just 31 days later, Olivia Colle passed away of a heart attack at her Mexico home in January 2018 at 75. The timing between their two deaths, so close together despite decades apart, remains one of the strangest coincidences in her story. The odds that two people, so far apart for so long, would leave the world almost together. Number 2. Kim Hamilton. Kim Hamilton, born Dorothy Mae Aiken in Los Angeles in 1932, spent more than 6 decades working steadily in film and television. She broke real barriers along the way, becoming the only Black performer with a speaking role on a major family sitcom of the late 1950s, and she appeared as Helen Robinson in the 1962 film adaptation of a landmark novel about racial injustice, playing a wife whose husband's life is ended by prejudice and violence. Her personal life moved through several chapters before she found lasting partnership. An early marriage at 18 ended in divorce after 10 years, and a second marriage in the early 1960s was short-lived. She spent more than 2 decades in a relationship with actor Werner Klemperer, best known for playing a rigid prison camp commandant on a popular wartime sitcom, before they finally married in 1997. Their marriage, delayed by decades of devotion before the wedding itself, lasted only 3 years before Klemperer's passing in December 2000. Hamilton continued acting afterward, appearing steadily through the 2000s and taking on a role in a 2010 film before stepping back from the industry that had shaped her entire adult life. She divided her final years between homes in Manhattan and Los Angeles, staying active in charitable and religious work. Kim Hamilton passed away in September 2013, 4 days after turning 81. 13 years after losing the husband she had waited more than 20 years to finally marry. Number 3. Fredi Washington. Frederica Carolyn Washington was born in Savannah, Georgia, in December 1903, and by the 1930s, she had become one of the most talked-about actresses of the Harlem Renaissance. Sadly, widowhood came to her twice, though only one marriage ended that way. Her first marriage, to trombonist Lawrence Brown, ended in divorce in 1951 after nearly 2 decades together. Her second marriage told a different story. She married Hugh Anthony Bell, a dentist in Stamford, Connecticut, and settled into a quiet life away from the film industry that had once typecast her so narrowly. Their marriage lasted almost 2 decades, giving her a stability that her earlier, more public years had rarely offered. After Bell passed away in October 1970, Freddie did not remarry. She was 66 years old when she became a widow, and she carried that loss into a retirement filled with activism, writing, and advocacy rather than acting. She had already stepped back from film roles by the late 1930s, so her later decades were shaped by community work, not by any attempt to rebuild a screen career. Freddie lived nearly 24 more years after losing Bell. During that stretch, she remained active in civil rights circles and continued mentoring younger Black performers, drawing on decades of hard-earned industry knowledge. She passed away in June 1994 in Stamford, Connecticut, following a stroke and pneumonia. She was 90 years old. Freddie Washington buried her husband in 1970 and kept living for almost a quarter century afterward, filling those years with purpose rather than retreat. Few people who watched her decades earlier on screen knew how long her second act really lasted. Number 4. Paul Robeson. Paul Robeson outlived the woman who built his career by more than a decade, though those final years looked nothing like the ones before her passing. Married to Eslanda Good in August 1921, his wife spent the next 4 decades as his manager, biographer, and closest political ally. She gave up her own scientific career to guide his rise from athlete and lawyer into a famous singer and actor. Their marriage endured real strain, including his affairs and her own doubts, yet it held together through decades of touring, activism, and later, government persecution. During the Cold War, both were harassed for their political views, and Paul's passport was revoked for years. But Eslanda stood beside him through surveillance, blacklisting, and a long exile in the Soviet Union. The couple returned to the United States in 1963 after Eslanda was diagnosed with breast cancer. Around the same time, Paul's own health began failing, worn down by the pressures of decades under attack. Unfortunately, Eslanda passed away in December 1965, 2 days before her 70th birthday, after years of declining health. Her demise left Paul without the partner who had guided nearly every chapter of his adult life. He moved in with his son's family shortly afterward and largely withdrew from public view. His health, already fragile from a serious illness earlier that decade, never fully recovered. Paul Robeson lived just over 10 more years after his wife's demise, spending most of that time in seclusion in Philadelphia. He passed away in January 1976. His final decade marked far more by decline than by the fame that had once defined him. Number 5. Ruby Dee. Ruby Dee met Ossie Davis in 1946 while working on a stage production together, and they married 2 years later. What followed was one of the most respected creative partnerships in Black entertainment history. They performed together constantly, on stage, film, and television, while also standing at the center of the civil rights movement. They hosted the March on Washington in 1963 and remained close to major figures in that struggle for decades. Their joint memoir, published in 1998, described their marriage honestly, including its hardest stretches.
On February 4, 2005, while working on the film Retirement in Miami, Florida, Ossie Davis died of natural causes at age 87. His family, friends, and fans gathered by the thousands at a Manhattan church.
Ossie lost his life suddenly in February 2005 while working on a film project away from home. Ruby had been traveling for her own work at the time of his passing. The loss was sudden and unexpected, arriving without warning after more than half a century of partnership, and it reshaped the remainder of her life immediately. However, Ruby did not withdraw from the world afterward. 2 years later, she delivered an acclaimed performance in a major crime drama, earning an Academy Award nomination at 83 years old. She continued working steadily, carrying Ossie's memory with her through public appearances and continued advocacy work. Ruby Dee spent 9 years living without the man she had shared 56 years of marriage with. And those years shaped the final chapter of her own remarkable life. She passed away in June 2014 at her home in New York, at 91 years old, 9 years after losing Aussie. She was cremated, and her ashes were placed in the same urn as his, fulfilling a wish the couple had written down together. Number 6. Cicely Tyson. Cicely Tyson met Miles Davis in the 1950s, and their relationship moved through cycles of closeness and separation for decades before they finally married in 1981. By then, both were already well known in their respective fields. The marriage brought public glamour, but also serious strain, including his struggles with addiction and periods of instability that Tyson later described honestly in her own writing. In 1988, she filed for divorce, and it was finalized the next year. She chose not to speak with him again after their separation, closing that chapter deliberately. Davis passed away in September 1991, roughly 2 years after their divorce became final. Tyson later revealed he had reached out to her shortly before his demise, offering an apology for the pain caused during their years together. She said she never doubted that they had loved each other despite everything. Tyson did not remarry after Davis's passing. She continued acting for another 3 decades, delivering some of the most respected performances of her career well into her 80s and 90s. Honors accumulated steadily, including a Presidential Medal of Freedom and an Honorary Academy Award recognizing her lifetime of work. She lived nearly 30 years longer than Davis, publishing her memoir just days before her own passing in January 2021 at age 96. She was buried beside him at Woodlawn Cemetery, a final resting arrangement that reunited them after decades apart. Number 7. Elena Reed Hall. Elena Reed Hall spent nearly 2 decades as a widow before finding love again, and that long stretch shaped the private half of a life most people only knew through television. Born Bernice Ruth Reed in 1946, she became famous playing Olivia on a beloved children's program, and later Rose Lee on a popular sitcom, roles that made her a familiar presence in homes across the country. While filming that sitcom in the 1980s, she met actor Kevin Peter Hall, a well-built performer known for physically demanding roles. Their on-screen characters married, and so did they, in December 1988. Unfortunately, Kevin had contracted HIV after a blood transfusion following a car accident, and doctors soon diagnosed him with AIDS-related pneumonia. He passed away in April 1991, just a few years into their marriage. Elena became a widow during a period when public understanding of AIDS remained clouded by fear and stigma. Carrying that private grief while continuing to raise their children and appear on screen for audiences who had no idea what she was living through at home. Nearly 17 years passed before she found love again, marrying Tamim Amini in 2008. That marriage came late in her life, arriving not long before her own health began to decline, but it gave her companionship during her final years. Elena Reed Hall passed away in December 2009 at 63, after a battle with breast cancer, roughly 18 years after losing Kevin. Her ashes were scattered into the Pacific Ocean, closing a life that held both a long private widowhood and a late second chance at love. Number 8. Zara Cully. Zara Cully was born in Worcester, Massachusetts in 1892 and spent decades building a career in theater and drama instruction long before television audiences ever saw her face. Fame found her late, arriving only after she had already lived most of her life away from cameras. She was already in her 80s when a sitcom role finally made her a household name. Millions came to know her as George Jefferson's sharp-tongued mother, a character who could shift the energy of a scene with a single glance. Long before that fame, though, Zara had built an entire life off stage. She married James M. Brown Sr. in 1914, and their partnership lasted more than 5 decades, including changing eras and shared responsibilities most families of that time carried. Then James passed away in 1968. Zara did not withdraw from life afterward. She kept working, kept teaching, and within a few years found the role that would introduce her to a much younger generation of viewers who had no idea how long she had already been perfecting her craft. Her success was not accidental. Decades of stage discipline gave her the timing and presence that made her performance memorable. Humor without losing authority, age carried without weakness. She brought a lifetime of preparation into a role that many actresses her age never would have been offered at all. Zara Cully passed away in Los Angeles in 1978 at 86, 10 years after losing James. Her story holds no scandal or manufactured grief. It is simply the account of a woman who outlived her husband, kept working steadily, and found her most famous role near the very end of a long, determined life. Number 9. James Earl Jones. 8 years passed between James Earl Jones losing his wife and his own demise, though little of that time played out in public view. He married Cecilia Hart in 1982, and their marriage lasted more than 3 decades. They raised a son together, Flynn, while keeping most of their home life carefully shielded from the public eye that followed his career. Cecilia battled ovarian cancer before her passing in 2016. That loss came during a period when Jones was still widely respected and occasionally working, though the years following her passing brought a noticeable shift. He appeared less often, choosing silence over the spotlight that had defined so much of his professional life. His path there had never been simple. As a child, he struggled with a severe stutter and spent years learning to speak with any confidence at all. A private battle that shaped how he later approached every performance requiring his voice. His career had already secured him a permanent place in American acting history. He gave a menacing, unforgettable voice to one of film's most famous villains, brought warmth and dignity to an animated Lion King, and built decades of respected work on Broadway, long before younger fans discovered him through blockbuster franchises. After Cecilia's demise, Jones never turned his grief into a public spectacle. He simply lived on a low, carrying decades of accomplishment alongside a private loss few outside his circle understood fully. He passed away on September 9, 2024, at 93, closing a life built on discipline, restraint, and endurance. Number 10. Eartha Kitt. Eartha Kitt was born in South Carolina in 1927 and spent her early years facing poverty, rejection, and constant uncertainty about where she truly belonged. She later turned those wounds into a sharp, stylish public image that refused to ask anyone for permission or approval. In 1960, she married John William McDonald, a real estate businessman and Korean War veteran. Their daughter, Kit, was born the following year, marking a brief period when Eartha tried to balance family life against the growing demands of fame. However, the marriage did not last long, ending in divorce in 1964. That timeline matters because her story should never be shaped into a false widow's tragedy. McDonald remained part of her real history, present during a formative stretch when she carried the combined weight of motherhood, racial barriers, and relentless public judgment, all while still building her career. McDonald passed away in 2005, 3 years before Eartha herself passed away.
The late, great singer, actress, entertainer Eartha Kitt, who passed away in 2008 at the age of 81.
By then, she had already lived through multiple lifetimes of reinvention: nightclub performer, recording artist, Broadway star, television icon, and political exile after publicly opposing the Vietnam War, followed by a determined late career comeback that proved her resilience. Eartha Kitt passed away from colon cancer on Christmas Day, 2008. Her connection to McDonald belongs in her story, but honestly framed. She was not a grieving widow when she passed away. She was a woman who had outlived an ex-husband, survived blacklisting, raised a daughter alone, and rebuilt her career again and again, right up until the very end. Number 11. Lena Horne. Lena Horne married Lenny Hayton, her longtime musical director, in 1947, a union that crossed racial lines at a time when interracial marriage still carried real danger and open hostility. He remained her partner both on and off stage until his passing in 1971, a loss that arrived during the same difficult period that also brought the demise of her son, Teddy. Horne had already spent decades proving her strength before those losses hit. As a black actress and singer working within the studio system, she carried beauty, discipline, and talent that Hollywood still worked hard to contain. Her film scenes were often edited out entirely for showings in certain parts of the country. Her image celebrated while her full humanity remained tightly controlled by the industry around her. Her marriage to Hayton, a white MGM music director, was complex and largely private, shaped by pressures neither fame nor talent could fully soften. It lasted until his final day, closing more than 2 decades of shared work and partnership that had defined much of her professional identity. After losing Hayton, Horne did not disappear from public life, though grief clearly reshaped the years ahead. She returned later with a celebrated one-woman stage show, her voice carrying memory, anger, pride, and survival, rather than simple nostalgia. She was telling a fuller story through song, one built from decades of racism, industry control, and personal heartbreak. Lena Horne passed away in 2010 at 92, nearly 4 decades after Hayton's passing. Her final years reflected dignity rather than sorrow, the record of a woman who protected her pain while leaving behind a voice that still sounds steady. Number 12. Brock Peters. Brock Peters married Dolores Dee Dee Daniels in 1961, and the couple raised a daughter together while he built a career that covered stage, film, television, and voice work across several decades. Dolores passed away in 1989 after a battle with cancer, leaving a private space in his life that the public rarely saw discussed. Peters had already secured his place in film history by then. In 1962, he played Tom Robinson in a landmark courtroom drama, portraying a black man trapped inside a racist legal system with restraint rather than exaggeration. He let the fear and injustice show through his posture and silence more than any theatrical performance, and that choice made the role stay with audiences for decades afterward. His career continued well beyond that single role. He appeared in a celebrated screen adaptation of a classic opera, worked steadily on Broadway, and later became familiar to a new generation of fans through science fiction television and voice acting work that introduced him to audiences who had never seen his earlier films. His final years carried more than professional achievement, though. He lived with age, declining health, and the ongoing absence of a wife who had shared nearly 3 decades of his adult life before her death. That private grief existed alongside his continued public work, rarely discussed, but clearly present. Brock Peters lost his life to pancreatic cancer in 2005, 16 years after Dolores. He left behind a body of work built on dignity, particularly in roles that could easily have been written smaller by an industry reluctant to give black men real depth on screen. Number 13. Juanita Moore. Juanita Moore married Charles Burris, a Los Angeles bus driver rather than any figure from the entertainment industry, a detail that says much about the private life she carefully protected away from the screen. Their marriage lasted roughly 50 years before his passing in 2001. More than a decade separated the loss of her husband from her own passing at nearly 100 years old. Recognition came slowly for Moore throughout her career. She worked first as a dancer, then took small film roles for years within an industry that rarely gave black actresses real space to be fully seen. Everything shifted in 1959 when she portrayed Annie Johnson, a black mother whose daughter rejects her own identity, in a performance built on direct pain rather than exaggeration. That role earned her an Academy Award nomination, an exceptionally rare achievement for a black actress during that era. Yet the recognition did not translate into lasting opportunity. Hollywood remained largely closed to her afterward, offering limited parts even as she continued working steadily across film, television, and theater for years to come. At home, she also cared for Charles as his health declined. Balancing a private caregiving role alongside whatever professional work still came her way. After his passing in 2001, she remained connected to acting and to her family, staying sharp enough in her final years to correct her own grandson's performance over the phone shortly before she passed on. Juanita Moore passed away in 2014 at 99, more than a decade after losing Charles. Her story reflects survival through neglect, racism, limited opportunity, and personal loss, carried by a woman whose pain stayed private even as her most important work remained permanently public. Number 14. LaWanda Page. Loss found LaWanda Page long before television audiences ever knew her sharp tongue and fearless timing. Born Alberta Peel in Cleveland, Ohio, she built an early life on stages where a black woman had to be tough and funny simply to survive the room. Public records indicate she was married and widowed 3 separate times over the course of her life, beginning when she was still a teenager. Her first marriage began when she was very young, and by 19, she had already lost her husband. She also lost a son in infancy, a grief that sat far beneath the laughter audiences later associated with her television persona. Before landing a steady role in a popular sitcom, Page worked as a dancer, comedian, and fire performer, billed in nightclubs as a woman who could swallow flames and command rough rooms with nothing but nerves. That background shaped everything that came later. The sharp tongue, hard stare, churning rhythm, and fearless comic timing she later brought to television did not appear from nowhere. They came from decades spent surviving circumstances that offered her very little protection or comfort along the way. Fame arrived late, through a longtime friend who helped bring her into a popular sitcom during the 1970s. As a Bible-quoting, insult-ready neighbor who stormed into scenes wearing a church hat, she became instantly unforgettable, though few viewers understood the private losses standing behind that performance. LaWanda Page passed away in 2002 from complications related to diabetes, having already outlived 3 husbands and buried a child decades earlier. Her career mixed pain, faith, sharp humor, and survival into something audiences still remember with genuine affection. Number 15. Diahann Carroll. Success suddenly felt useless in 1977, when Diahann Carroll learned that her husband, Robert DeLeon, had lost his life in a car accident just 2 years into their marriage. By then, she was already far more than a familiar television face. Born in the Bronx in 1935, she had worked her way through nightclubs, Broadway, film, and network television during an era when black actresses were still fighting simply to be seen as complete, complicated people. Her breakthrough role made television history, and her Academy Award-nominated film performance a few years later proved she could carry both elegance and genuine pain on screen with equal skill. Robert DeLeon entered her life after years of intense public attention and private disappointment. A magazine editor younger than she was, their marriage drew scrutiny partly because Carroll was already a closely watched public figure. The accident ended everything before their relationship had time to settle into anything ordinary. Carroll responded the way many performers do when private life suddenly breaks apart. She returned to work, not because the loss felt small, but because stopping entirely was never something the industry around her made easy or acceptable. Her story continued honestly beyond that single tragedy. DeLeon was not her final husband. She later married singer Vic Damone, and that marriage eventually ended in divorce as well. Still, Robert's sudden passing remained one of the most serious losses in a life already carrying significant pressure, public scrutiny, and later, serious illness. Carroll kept performing for decades afterward, protecting her public image while showing younger black actresses that grace was never the same thing as weakness. She passed away in 2019 at 84, after a battle with cancer.
Singer and Tony Award-winning actress Diahann Carroll has died. According to Variety, the Bronx-born actress lost her battle with cancer at her home in Los Angeles,
having lived through tragedy without ever letting it define her completely. Number 16. Claudia McNeil. Claudia McNeil married William Henry Smith while still a young woman, and public records suggest he passed away during World War II, leaving her to carry that grief quietly for years before Hollywood ever offered her a real opportunity. That private history shaped the depth she later brought to her most famous role. Her performance as Lena Younger carried real weight rather than empty volume. She portrayed a mother trying to hold a black family together while poverty, pride, racism, and disappointment pressed in from every direction. In the 1961 film adaptation, opposite Sidney Poitier, she played a woman who felt genuinely lived in, tired, loving, firm, and wounded all at once. That performance did not come from imagination alone. Years of stage work, film roles, and television appearances built her career steadily. Though Hollywood never gave her the wide range of opportunities her talent deserved, older black actresses of her generation consistently found limited space in an industry unwilling to fully embrace their range. She earned lasting respect for her work in that landmark film, a role that remains her most remembered contribution to American drama. Later in life, she stepped back from acting entirely and spent her final years living at the Actors Fund nursing home in New Jersey, away from the industry that had once celebrated her. Claudia McNeil passed away in 1993 from complications related to diabetes. Her story includes decades lived after an early wartime loss, but it should never be reduced to widowhood alone. It is the story of a woman who carried private sorrow into public art and left behind one of the most honest portrayals of Black motherhood ever captured on screen. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.